A rising rap star, a brutal crime, and a shocking twist. This case will leave you speechless. What could turn a night of celebration into a violent nightmare? A freestyle rap battle that was supposed to mark the start of a career. Instead, it marked the beginning of a fight for survival. Imagine being forced into a life-or-death situation. Shot 10 times. Set on fire. Left for dead. But Brielle Saunders didn't just survive. What happened next will make you question everything you thought you knew about resilience, survival, and justice. Stay with me till the end, because this story is about more than just a crime. It's about a battle against the odds, an unimaginable journey, and the ultimate question: what does it truly take to survive when everything is taken from you? Every day, countless crimes are committed that shock our communities, but none quite like this. Brielle Saunders, a young woman on the verge of stardom, had her life changed forever in an instant. Shot, left for dead, and yet still survived. This is the story of how one woman, a rising rap star, faced an attack so brutal it seemed impossible to survive. But Brielle did survive, and her journey is not just about the crime itself, but about what it means to fight back when the odds are stacked against you. In the next moments, we'll reveal the shocking truth behind her survival and the hunt for the people responsible for this violent act. In the upcoming segments, we will unravel the chilling details of Brielle's attack. From the moment she was shot to the search for the assailants and the truth behind the motive, every piece of this story connects in a way you won't expect. You'll learn the shocking facts and see how one woman's fight for her life reveals a greater story of strength and survival. On New Year's Day in 2014, Brielle was at the height of her career. She was a name beginning to rise in the rap scene, not just because of her undeniable talent, but because of the sheer confidence she exuded. It wasn't just her lyrics, it was her voice, her command of the stage, and the power she had to captivate her audience. She had just won a freestyle rap battle in Columbus, Georgia, was where it all came together for her. The room was filled with anticipation, the air thick with energy. Brielle stood tall, unshaken, knowing this battle would define her. When the microphone was handed to her, she unleashed a raw performance that earned her respect and adoration from the crowd, impressing everyone with her talent and presence. But behind her victory, something darker was about to unfold. As Brielle accepted her victory, 3 men, Robert Johnson, Katori Glover, and Joey Guerin, 3 men, driven by jealousy and rage, couldn't accept being outshined by a woman in a male-dominated space. The crowd's cheers stung them, the loss of the battle an insult they couldn't swallow. They couldn't accept that someone like Brielle, someone with her confidence, talent, and promise, was taking the spotlight away from them. What happened next wasn't just an act of envy. It was a calculated, brutal attack that would change everything. An act of violence so brutal it left her fighting for her life. If this story shocked you and left you speechless, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Don't miss out on more gripping true crime stories, real-life struggles, and powerful voices like Brielle's. Subscribe now, and join us as we continue to bring you the untold stories that deserve to be heard. As Brielle left the event, basking in her victory, she was unaware that danger was just around the corner. The 3 men followed her, their anger and jealousy simmering. They had been humiliated in front of a crowd, but they didn't care about their reputation anymore. What mattered now was silencing Brielle forever. They ambushed her in a secluded parking lot. The first blow came swiftly, a gunshot to the leg. Brielle staggered, falling to the ground in pain, but the attack didn't stop there. They took turns violating her, sexually assaulting her in a brutal act of dominance. When they were done, they shot her multiple times, 10 shots, to be exact. Each bullet ripping through her body as she lay there, motionless, left for dead. But her tormentors weren't finished. They did something that no one could have predicted. They set her on fire. They poured gasoline on her and burned her alive, ensuring there was no chance of survival. They left her there in the cold, believing she would never survive. Brielle, broken and bleeding, was on the brink of death. But she refused to give up. Her body was battered, her spirit battered, but the fight inside her wouldn't die. With every ounce of strength, she crawled through the dirt, determined to escape the darkness that had overtaken her. In the distance, she saw a faint light, a car passing by. She screamed, but her voice was barely a whisper. Still, she didn't stop. She crawled, her body screaming in agony, until finally someone heard her cries. The rescue came just in time. Brielle was rushed to the hospital, barely clinging to life. The doctors worked tirelessly to save her, but the physical and emotional wounds ran deep. Despite the odds, she survived. But the battle wasn't over yet. Now, Brielle had to face a different kind of fight, the fight for justice. The authorities, shocked by the cruelty of the crime, immediately launched a manhunt for the 3 men responsible. The community was in uproar, demanding justice for Brielle. It didn't take long before the attackers, Robert, Katori, and Joey, were eventually apprehended. But they didn't show any remorse. Instead, they tried to justify their actions, claiming that Brielle had provoked them. Their defense was sickening. They tried to downplay their actions, attempting to justify the unimaginable violence. But Brielle's testimony was powerful. She relived the horror, detailing the moments of terror and violation she had suffered. However, the case took an unexpected turn. The defense team tried to discredit Brielle's version of events, alleging inconsistencies in her statements and questioning the evidence. It became clear that Brielle's struggle wasn't just against the men who hurt her. It was against a system that was trying to silence her. But Brielle wasn't backing down. She was determined to fight for her voice, for her justice, and for all women who had been silenced. As the trial unfolded, more details came to light. Evidence of sexual assault was undeniable, and the brutality of the attack was impossible to ignore. But just as the case was nearing its conclusion, a shocking twist occurred. One of the men's close associates came forward with information that turned the case on its head. Brielle had been targeted because of her success, her fearlessness, and her refusal to be controlled. The men had plotted the attack for days, seeing Brielle as a threat to their egos, and they made her pay the ultimate price for it. A key witness, someone close to the attackers, suddenly came forward with new information that changed everything. It was revealed that the 3 men had planned the attack for days, and that they had not only been motivated by jealousy but also by a deep-seated desire to assert control over a woman they saw as a threat. To understand the tragedy of what happened in Columbus, Georgia, we need to first look at the city itself, a place rich in history but now etched in the hearts of its residents for a crime that would leave them forever scarred. Columbus is a city where Southern hospitality meets the realities of urban struggle. Known for its military base, Fort Benning, and its proximity to Alabama, it represents a unique blend of old Southern charm and modern American challenges. In this close-knit community, a tragedy was about to unfold that would shake it to its core. Columbus has always been a city of contrasts, where traditions collide with new ideas. It's the kind of town where everybody knows everybody's business, yet secrets can still remain hidden. And on the first day of 2014, one of these secrets was about to emerge, a brutal attack that would be remembered for years to come. It was supposed to be a night of celebration, a New Year's Day rap battle in Columbus that showcased the talents of up-and-coming stars. Brielle Saunders, a rising star in the underground rap scene, stood out, not only for her fierce skills but for her resilience in a world dominated by men. She was determined to prove herself, to make a name for herself in an industry that often overlooked women. That night, Brielle's performance would be a turning point, but for all the wrong reasons. Instead of a victory celebration, Brielle became the target of a senseless, horrific crime. After the rap battle, As she walked away from the spotlight, three men, Robert Johnson, Katori Glover, and Joey Guerin, decided that they could not accept her success. Fueled by jealousy and rage, they abducted Brielle at gunpoint, forcing her into a secluded area. What happened next is almost impossible to comprehend. But how did Brielle survive such a vicious attack? The answer is resilience, and the will to live. With her last ounce of strength, she crawled to safety, her screams echoing into the night. She was found by a passerby, bloodied and burned, but very much alive. Brielle's story was far from over. As soon as the police were alerted to the crime, an investigation was launched. The brutality of the attack left little room for doubt. This was not a simple crime of passion, but something far more calculated. Brielle was taken to the hospital, where doctors fought to save her life. Meanwhile, investigators began piecing together the events leading to the attack. What they uncovered was shocking, a trail of jealousy, rage, and violence that had been building for days before the assault. Witnesses came forward, providing details of the rap battle, but the most crucial piece of evidence came from Brielle herself. Despite her injuries, she was able to give a statement that would later become vital in the case. Her description of the attackers, along with forensic evidence found at the scene, was enough to lead the police to the suspects, Robert Johnson, Katori Glover, and Joey Guerin. But even as investigators closed in on the men, they continued to deny their involvement, claiming that the attack had been consensual. The trial that followed was a battle not just for justice but for truth. The accused men, now in custody, tried to downplay the severity of their actions, insisting it was all a misunderstanding. But the evidence was irrefutable. Brielle's testimony, combined with forensic analysis and witness statements, painted a picture of premeditated violence. The prosecution was determined to see that justice was served. But would the courts see it the same way? As the trial unfolded, investigators continued to uncover new evidence. Forensic experts analyzed the crime scene, finding traces of gasoline and gunpowder that confirmed the attackers' intentions. 911 calls were retrieved, revealing the panic in the voices of witnesses who discovered Brielle's body, and interviews with experts, lawyers, psychologists, and law enforcement provided further insights into the minds of the perpetrators. Could the men have had an accomplice? Was there a deeper motive behind the crime, something more than just jealousy and revenge? Was there something about Brielle's rise in the rap world that threatened them so much that they decided to take matters into their own hands? These are the questions that investigators and the public continued to ask as the case unfolded. Psychologists weighed in on the attacker's mindset, explaining how feelings of emasculation and jealousy could have triggered such violent behavior. Legal analysts dissected the case, pointing out the legal challenges the prosecution faced in securing a conviction. And forensic specialists discussed the injuries Brielle endured, how she managed to survive despite being shot 10 times and set on fire. The brutality of Brielle Saunders' attack was not just physical. It cut deeper, leaving emotional scars that would be impossible to fully comprehend. As the survivors, law enforcement, and even the public tried to make sense of what had occurred, a much darker layer to this tragedy emerged. The three men involved in the attack weren't random criminals. They were men who felt a sense of entitlement over Brielle's existence, her success, and her right to occupy space in the hip-hop world. This wasn't just about rage, it was about a twisted sense of ownership, control, and dominance. Toxic masculinity was at the core of their actions. These men had grown up with a distorted belief system, one where power over women wasn't just seen as normal, it was expected. To them, Brielle's success was a challenge to their fragile egos. They were enraged by the idea of a woman rising to prominence in a field traditionally dominated by men. But what fueled their violence was not just a desire for revenge. It was the ingrained belief that she had overstepped her place. In their minds, this wasn't an isolated crime. This was the result of years of social conditioning, where men were taught to dominate, to suppress, and to control. Brielle, a woman with her own voice, defied all of that. Her success was seen as an attack on their masculinity. And so, their solution wasn't just to silence her, it was to destroy her in the most brutal way possible. This mentality is not unique. The concept of entitlement that underpins so many acts of violence against women stems from centuries of systemic oppression, where women were objectified and treated as less than human. These men viewed Brielle not as an individual but as an object, someone to be controlled, punished, and degraded. While the legal proceedings and the media attention focused on the criminals, no one could truly understand the depth of Brielle's pain. The physical injuries were shocking, yes, the bullet wounds, the burns, the scars on her body that would never fade. But the emotional toll, the psychological trauma, was even worse. Imagine the fear, the confusion, the sense of betrayal she felt. Every moment of her life had been taken from her, her safety, her freedom, her body, all violently ripped away. Even in the hospital, as doctors worked to save her, Brielle's mind raced. Would she ever feel whole again? Could she ever trust anyone, let alone walk into a room and feel confident as a woman, as an artist? The psychological damage was profound. Survivors of such violent crimes often struggle with feelings of helplessness and shame, feelings that are not their own but are imposed upon them by society's victim-blaming culture. Brielle faced not only the trauma of the attack itself but the crushing weight of a world that still too often asks, "What was she wearing?" or "Why was she there?" instead of holding the perpetrators accountable. Even after Brielle had physically recovered, the mental scars were far harder to heal. The constant nightmares, the flashbacks, the feeling of vulnerability. It became a battle every day. PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, began to set in. She began to mistrust even her closest friends, constantly questioning their intentions, as the trauma colored every interaction. And yet, Brielle never gave up. She didn't allow herself to be defined by the monsters who tried to destroy her. But while Brielle fought to survive, the trauma didn't just stay with her, it rippled outward, affecting everyone around her. Her family and friends were also forced to grapple with the aftermath of what had happened. The emotional toll on loved ones of a victim is often underestimated. Watching someone you care about suffer, knowing that you can't take the pain away, is an experience that shapes relationships forever. As much as Brielle fought to reclaim her life, the aftermath of the attack was a battle for everyone in her circle. Her friends, her family, and even her community felt the shockwaves. They were forced to reframe their own sense of safety, their understanding of the world around them. Could anyone really be safe? Could someone who had been on top, admired and respected, be reduced to an object of violence in the blink of an eye? Brielle's experience was not isolated. It was a reflection of a larger societal issue that affected many women, especially in industries where they had to fight not just for their careers but for their right to exist without fear. But what set Brielle apart was not just the violence she endured, but the way she chose to respond. She turned her pain into power. Her music, her voice, became more than just art. It became a weapon, a tool of resistance. The 3 men who attacked Brielle were sentenced. But what did that really mean in the grand scheme of things? Justice for Brielle was more than just seeing them behind bars. It was about breaking the cycle that allowed such violence to thrive. Toxic masculinity wasn't just something those men were raised with. It was something that society perpetuated, quietly, for generations. Brielle's case, though horrific, shed light on the need for a deeper cultural shift. The fight was no longer just about prosecuting criminals. It was about creating a world where women no longer had to fear such violence. It was about changing how men viewed women and challenging the belief that power could only be maintained by controlling others. But this change wouldn't come overnight. It would require not just legal reform but a cultural reckoning. Brielle's story was a catalyst for that reckoning. Her voice, once silenced, now echoed for every woman who had ever felt unsafe, unheard, and unseen. Through this analysis, we see how deep the psychological scars run, not just on the victim, but on society at large. The perpetrators may have been held accountable for their actions, but the impact of their violence would resonate for years to come. As for Brielle, her journey to heal was not an easy one. It was marked by pain, but also by an unbreakable will to rise again. Through her music, her advocacy, and her courage, she reminded the world that survival is not just about enduring, it's about reclaiming power. In a world where violence often leaves survivors isolated, their stories are a testament to resilience. Today, we hear from those who have risen from the ashes of their trauma to reclaim their power. These are not just stories of survival, but stories of strength, of reclaiming life after the unthinkable. Take Anna's story. Anna was a young artist, like Brielle, with a passion for music. One night, during what seemed like a routine performance at a local venue, she was attacked. The violence was quick, brutal, and left her scarred, not just physically but emotionally. For years, she struggled with feelings of shame, of wondering whether she'd ever be whole again. But one day, after a long period of silence, Anna returned to the stage. Her first performance post-trauma wasn't about the applause. It was about reclaiming her voice, about standing tall in a world that tried to silence her. Then there's Marcus, a man who never saw himself as a survivor until he realized how much he'd endured. A victim of domestic abuse, he fought a different battle, one where his masculinity and his pain were constantly questioned. His journey to healing came through community support and an understanding that vulnerability does not make him weak. His story challenges the idea that men don't suffer from gender-based violence, and his openness about it allowed others in his circle to heal too. Every survivor's journey is unique, but they all share one thing in common: the refusal to be defined by their trauma. As we listen to these stories, let them remind us that resilience is not about the absence of pain, it's about moving forward despite it. No one heals alone. The stories of survival we hear today would not have been possible without the critical support systems that rallied behind these individuals. In fact, for every survivor, there is a network of family, friends, and professionals who make healing possible. In Sarah's story, she recalls how her mother's unyielding support was her anchor. After the assault, Sarah felt completely lost. It wasn't until her mother stayed by her side, listening, never forcing her to speak before she was ready, that Sarah began to open up. She went to therapy, surrounded herself with a close-knit group of survivors who understood her experience, and slowly but surely, she started the process of reclaiming her power. Therapists and counselors also played a critical role in Sarah's healing. Psychological support helped her process her trauma, but it was the community she found in support groups that truly gave her the strength to move forward. These groups created a space where she was never alone in her pain, where her voice was heard and validated. Survivor networks, family, and friends, these are the lifelines that help individuals feel seen. They are the quiet heroes in every survivor's journey, reminding them every day that healing is possible, and that they are never forgotten. Behind every survivor's story is a complex, often flawed, legal system. The pursuit of justice, while critical, is far from simple. For many survivors, the path to accountability is a long and difficult one. The criminal justice system can often feel like a maze, one where survivors' voices are drowned out by bureaucracy, where the evidence of violence is questioned, and where the very nature of their trauma is scrutinized. Take the case of Brielle Saunders. Though the world watched the case unfold, the investigation was riddled with complications. Victims of gender-based violence often face a harsh reality. Law enforcement may not take their cases seriously, or worse, they may be treated as suspects in their own assaults. In Brielle's case, while the police worked tirelessly, the road to holding the perpetrators accountable was paved with delays, conflicting statements, and a lack of crucial evidence. This wasn't an isolated incident. In fact, the vast majority of gender-based violence cases face similar hurdles. Survivors often have to relive their trauma during investigations, which can sometimes feel more like an interrogation than a search for justice. For many victims, these challenges result in them giving up on pursuing justice altogether, believing that the system will never truly hold their perpetrators accountable. This is a reality that needs to change. Law enforcement must be equipped with the training, resources, and empathy necessary to handle gender-based violence cases with the gravity they deserve. In the face of such systemic barriers, advocacy groups and reform efforts have emerged as powerful forces in the fight for justice. These organizations are working tirelessly to change the way gender-based violence is treated, from law enforcement to the courtroom and beyond. One such group, the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, NCADV, is fighting to ensure that survivors' voices are heard and respected in every step of the legal process. These groups push for stronger laws, better resources for survivors, and more training for police officers to handle these sensitive cases. They also work to ensure that survivors have access to legal counsel, support services, and trauma-informed care throughout the investigation and prosecution. But the fight doesn't end with the law. Advocacy extends to public policy, working to reshape how society views gender-based violence. This includes pushing for education campaigns that challenge toxic masculinity, ensuring that communities understand the signs of abuse and are equipped to support survivors in meaningful ways. Reform isn't just about passing new laws. It's about reshaping the systems that allow violence to perpetuate, creating a world where survivors are not only protected but also empowered to rebuild their lives. How does the media shape our understanding of gender-based violence? The way stories are told, the images shown, and the language used can either perpetuate harmful stereotypes or offer an opportunity for awareness and change. Too often, the media sensationalizes these crimes, focusing more on the violence than on the experiences of the survivors. This type of portrayal can diminish the real human suffering that occurs and leads to victim-blaming narratives. When Brielle's story first hit the headlines, the focus wasn't always on the horrors of the crime but rather on the sensational details. Media outlets were quick to sensationalize her status as an up-and-coming artist, often framing her as another celebrity tragedy, distancing the violence from the human cost it entailed. This is a common issue when gender-based violence is reported. It becomes a story of shock value rather than a story of survival and a call to action. However, change is happening. Artists, journalists, and filmmakers are beginning to shift the narrative. More survivors are using the media to tell their own stories, reclaim their voices, and highlight the real human toll that violence takes on their lives. The media now has a crucial role in shaping the way society views gender-based violence, and in creating a culture of accountability. Art has always been a powerful tool for social change, and in the context of gender-based violence, it has become a form of resistance. Many artists, including musicians, filmmakers, and writers, use their platforms to raise awareness about these issues. Music, in particular, has long been a vehicle for survivors to share their stories and for society to confront uncomfortable truths. Brielle Saunders, in her healing, chose to express her pain through music. Her albums, often raw and deeply personal, gave voice to what many others could not say. Artists like Brielle, and many others, use their work not just to entertain but to inform, to educate, and to spark dialogue about gender-based violence. Through these artistic expressions, conversations are started, empathy is built, and collective action is inspired. Art becomes a bridge between survivors and the rest of the world, one that leads to awareness, understanding, and ultimately change. Around the world, movements are emerging to combat gender-based violence on a global scale. The United Nations, for example, has made ending violence against women and girls a central part of its Sustainable Development Goals. Organizations such as UN Women and Amnesty International are working with governments and local communities to create safer environments for women everywhere. But it's not just global institutions making an impact. Grassroots initiatives are also paving the way for tangible change. Local organizations in countries like India, Nigeria, and Brazil are providing resources, shelter, and legal support for survivors, creating safe spaces for women to rebuild their lives and reclaim their power. These movements are vital in reshaping attitudes, building public awareness, and creating a culture of respect and equality. Change doesn't only come from the top down, it comes from the bottom up. Across the world, community programs are making a significant difference. From neighborhood groups that provide safe spaces for survivors to local advocacy campaigns that challenge harmful norms, these grassroots efforts are proving that change is possible at the local level. In communities where resources are scarce, programs like these become lifelines. They provide survivors with not just the emotional support they need but also the tools to navigate their journey toward healing. By empowering survivors, these programs show that hope is not just a distant dream. It is something that can be found in the communities that rise up to protect and support one another. The most effective way to prevent gender-based violence is to start early, by educating future generations. Schools, universities, and organizations are beginning to incorporate lessons on consent, respect, and healthy relationships into their curriculums. By instilling these values at a young age, we can create a culture where gender-based violence is not only unthinkable, but unacceptable. As we've journeyed through this powerful story, one thing becomes clear: gender-based violence is not just a statistic, it's a lived reality for far too many. But this is not a story without hope. Survivors, advocates, and communities are rising to the challenge, and you can be part of that change. Here's how you can help. Engage in the conversation. Share your thoughts, theories, and reflections in the comments below. What can we do to make a real difference? How can we support survivors better? Your voice matters. Support survivors. Whether it's donating to organizations that help survivors or offering your support to someone in need, every action counts. If you are or know someone who is experiencing violence, reach out to the hotlines and resources available. You are not alone. Educate others. Share what you've learned today with your family, friends, and community. Let's raise awareness and challenge the norms that perpetuate violence. Knowledge is power, and we all need to be part of the solution. Advocate for change. Push for policies that protect survivors and create safer communities. Your voice can inspire lawmakers to take action and ensure that the legal system is truly there to support victims of violence. Subscribe and share. If you believe this content is important, hit that like button and subscribe to keep up with more stories that challenge perceptions, bring awareness, and inspire change. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message. Remember, we all have a role in breaking the cycle of violence. Let's be the change. Together, we can create a world where stories like Brielle's are no longer a reality, but a reminder of how far we've come. The story doesn't end here. Join us next time as we explore another gripping case that will leave you questioning the system. What happens when the law fails a victim? Find out in our next episode, where we take a deep dive into the complexities of justice and what happens when it's out of reach. Until then, stay informed, stay engaged, and stay compassionate.